Greetings and salutations, everyone. I hope everyone is doing well today, and welcome to this upload. Before we jump on into it, a couple quick links. As many of you know, I rely on Patreon, PayPal, channel membership, and the merch to help the channel to continue to grow and go. Links to Patreon, PayPal, and channel membership is in the description below. Merch displayed directly under the video. Also, Dogman Frightening Encounters Volume 1 through 3, the audiobook versions. They were written and researched by Tom Lyons, narrated and produced by me, Jeff Nadolny. Those audiobooks, they're available on Audible, Amazon, and iTunes, links to which are also in the description as well. And finally, last but definitely not least, if you'd really like to help support this channel to continue to grow and go, simply subscribe. It does not cost a cent. Click the like button. It takes half a second. If you don't want to miss out on any of the informative uploads that I put out daily, click that bell icon, and folks, please leave a comment and share the video. Why? Well, because all of these things really do help the channel to continue to grow and go. They definitely do matter, and they are appreciated. And with that, I have taken far too much of your time. Let's jump into today's upload, shall we? Alright folks, so today's terrifying experience comes to us from a subscriber out of Utah, and I am not going to mention his name or his friend's name because one, they were trespassing, and they don't know if the statute of limitations has run out. Two, because the location of their trespass is a very famous area in Utah. Not as famous as it is more famous now than it was back then. But it just started to get notoriety around the time when their experiences had happened. And I kind of want to go into a little bit about the location first, but Skinwalker Ranch. And two guys that grew up together in Utah, and they decided that they wanted to go and check out Skinwalker Ranch. They had heard the local lore and myth of everything, and they decided that they were going to come in through the back way, going through Dry Gulch Creek area. And what they saw from that point to a week later while camping in the Uinta mountains, both are connected in a very serious and terrifying way, and you will put the connection together immediately, because it was almost like whatever they encountered on the ranch had followed them. So let's get into it. All right, so prior to getting into their experiences, I want to just quickly go over Skinwalker Ranch. I'm sure there's people out there that already know what Skinwalker Ranch is and have heard of it. It's obviously one of the most famous locations for paranormal and UFO activity in the United States. Countless TV shows and such. But there are two amazing books that I value in my collection, one being Hunt for Skinwalker, and probably the best, I think, is Skinwalker and the Pentagon, which both hold a tremendous amount of information. And the info that I'm going to share with you actually solidifies these two gentlemen's experience. First and foremost, I can't share their name for the reason I shared in the beginning, but they are from Vernal, Utah. One is full Native American, Ute, and the other is not Native American. They both grew up together as best friends. They were both actually in foster care together, and really had a connection to the paranormal. Cryptids, Bigfoot was their go-to for paranormal and cryptid thing, until they started to hear local talk about what was going on in the region of the Skinwalker Ranch out in Ballard. And once they started hearing about that, they wanted to go and see the infamous large wolf that had been spotted there. Some people thought it was a dire wolf. Others called it like a werewolf. Obviously, people were saying Skinwalker. And now, even in this book right here, George Knapp's book, Skinwalkers at the Pentagon and Hunt for Skinwalker, they are referred to as Dogmen, which is just amazing to me, because the Skinwalker at the Pentagon had to be read by the Department of Defense prior to putting it out. So the person who, or people, or maybe it was an algorithm, I don't know. I'm assuming it was read personally. They went through this and they read the word Dogman. Either they didn't know what it was, either they passed over that and just said, or they investigated, what the hell is a Dogman? Like, any person who is reading something would, I when I read something and I don't know what something is, I will deep dive into that and put the book aside for, a couple hours. But anyway, according to local legend, a ranch located on approximately 480 acres southeast of Ballard, Utah, in the United States is, or at least once was, allegedly the site of substantial Skinwalker activity. The farm is actually called Skinwalker Ranch by local Native Americans who believe it lies in the path of the Skinwalker, taking its name from the Navajo legend. It was made famous during the 90s and early 2000s when claims about the ranch first appeared in the Utah Desert News and later in Las Vegas Mercury during a series of riveting articles by journalist George Knapp. Subsequently, a book titled Hunt for Skinwalker, Science Confronts the Unexplained at a Remote Ranch in Utah, describes how the ranch was acquired by the now defunct National Institute for Discovery Science, NIDS, which purchased the property for study. Anecdotal sightings of UFO, Bigfoot-like creatures, crop circles, glowing orbs, poltergeist activity reported by its former owners. Two-part article by Knapp for the Vegas Mercury, was published November 21st and 29th, 2002, titled, Is a Utah Ranch the Strangest Place on Earth? It told of frightening events that had left the owners of the ranch befuddled and broke, from bizarre bulletproof wolf things to mutilated prize cattle and other instances in which animals and property simply disappeared or were obliterated overnight. As elsewhere, these events were accompanied by strong odors, ghostly rapping, strange lights, violent nightmares, and other paranormal phenomena. Beside the owners of Skinwalker Ranch, other residents throughout the county made similar reports over the years. Junior Hicks, a retired local school teacher, cataloged more than 400 anomalies in nearby communities before the year 2000. He and others said that for as long as anyone could remember, this part of Utah had been the site of unexplained activity, from UFO sightings to Sasquatch manifestations. What I think when Junior had talked about and categorized Dogman in like the Sasquatch kind of cup or whatever. I don't think that he was aware of, I mean, we're talking early 2000s to late 90s. There was not a lot of talk about Dogman. There had been documented sightings dating back 1800s in United States newspapers, but there was no name, so they categorized everything as Bigfoot or Sasquatch. It was as if a gateway to the world from beyond existed within the basin. Some of the Skinwalker Ranch descriptions seem to indicate as much. For example, in one event repeated by Knapp, an investigator named Chad Detkin and ranch owner saw mysterious lights. Both men watched intently as the light grew brighter. It was as if someone had opened a window or a doorway. The ranch owner grabbed his night vision binoculars to get a better look, but could hardly believe what he was seeing. The dull light began to resemble a bright portal, and at one end of that portal, a large black humanoid seemed to be struggling to crawl through the tunnel of light. After a few minutes, the humanoid figure wriggled out of the light and took off into the darkness. As it did, the window of light snapped shut, as if someone had flicked an off switch. In 1996, Skinwalker Ranch was purchased by real estate developer and aerospace entrepreneur Robert T. Bigelow, a wealthy Las Vegas businessman who founded NIDS in 1995 to research and serve as a central clearinghouse for scientific investigations into fringe science, paranormal topics, and UFOlogy. Bigelow planned an intense but very private scientific study of the events at the farm. He was joined by high-ranking military officials, including retired United States Army Colonel John B. Alexander, who had worked and developed Jedi, a remote viewing and psychic experiments for the military, as described in John Ronson's book, The Men Who Stare at Goats. Former police detectives and scientists include Eric W. Davis, who worked for NASA. In the years before, Bigelow had donated $3.7 million to the University of Nevada for the creation and continuation of a program that would attract to the university renowned experts on the aspect of human consciousness. Bigelow's chair for the university program was parapsychology. Charles Tart, a man famous for extending research on altered states of consciousness, near-death experiences, and extrasensory perception. But what Bigelow's team found at Skinwalker Ranch was much more than they had hoped for, at least for a while, including an invisible force moving through the ranch and through animals. On this, the Las Vegas Mercury reported, November of 2002, one witness. This is awesome because right here, I believe what they are talking about is what we call the Glimmer Man. Let's see. One witness reported a path of displaced water in the canal, as if a large unseen animal was briskly moving through the water. There were distinct splashing noises, and there was a foul, pungent odor that filled the air, but nothing could be seen. A neighbor rancher reported the same phenomenon 2 months later. The ranch owners say that several instances where something invisible moved through the cattle, splitting the herd. The neighbor reported the same thing. Yet, all of these anomalous incidences at the ranch, there was one that took the prize. On the evening of March 12th, 1997, barking dogs alerted the NIDS team that something strange was in a tree near the house. The ranch owner grabbed a hunting rifle and jumped into his pickup truck, racing toward the tree. 2 of the NIDS staffers followed in a second truck. Knapp tells what happened next. Up in the tree branches, they could make out a huge set of yellowish reptilian eyes. The head of this animal had to be 3 feet wide, they guessed. At the bottom of the tree was something else. Gorman described it as a huge and hairy, with massive muscled front legs and a dog-like head. Gorman, who was a crack shot, fired at both of these creatures from the distance of 40 yards. The creature on the ground seemed to vanish, but the thing in the tree apparently fell to the ground because Gorman heard it as it landed heavily in a patch of snow below. All three men ran through the pasture and scrub, chasing what they thought was a wounded animal, but they never found the animal and saw no blood. A professional tracker was brought in the next day to scour the area, but there was a physical clue left behind. At the bottom of the tree, they found and photographed a weird print, or rather claw print. The print was left in the snow, was from something large. It had 3 digits with what they guessed were sharp claws at the end. Later analysis and comparison of the print led them to find a chilling similarity. The print from the ranch closely resembled a velociraptor, an extinct dinosaur made famous in the Jurassic Park films. So the Glimmer Man, and I've thought this because there was a Native American security guard, and I believe the park was in Colorado, and I'm just going off the top of my head, so excuse me for not knowing the name of the park off the top, but he had been guarding or in the security house, and at night they would notice strange stuff going on. One night he had seen a set of eyes, and he saw them kind of shimmy up this fence and land onto the security house or hut or whatever you want to call it. And it freaked him out so bad. There was a couple other times that he seen, this Glimmer Man-like creature or predator-like creature, right? So it makes sense that these creatures would be around the Skinwalker Ranch. One, because I believe they are the reptilian or draconian like creatures, able to blend in with their environment. Obviously, we know through encounters and writing and reading such about Dulce that these reptilian or draconian have used genetic labs in these deep underground military bases to create different genetic species and such. So that's what I think this is. But it was interesting because there's a Dogman right underneath one of these reptilian-like Glimmermen creatures. Were they fighting? Were they working together? What is the answer to that? Because, how I've heard, and many of you have heard experiences with Bigfoot and Dogman, either working together or fighting with each other. Not so much with reptilian. And I've read different things with talking about like Sumerian texts, Anasazi, and other such stuff, that there was the reptilian race known as the Draconian, but in Sumerian text it talks about a dog-headed race of aliens that were very violent. So I just find it interesting that, these two guys were going to this location, had heard about it, went, and then had this crazy experience that I'm going to share with you right now. We're lucky to get away. And then sometime later, not much later, but a week later, or give or take a couple of days, we're in the Uinta Mountains camping and had the same type of creature ambushed them while camping. Now I'm going to share that with you, and then I've got some other information that I want to share with you from that region of Skinwalker Ranch, like hyena-like creatures being spotted at the ranch. All right, so I can't really give you an exact date, one, because of, statute of limitations. They were trespassing. That's the only crime they committed, was trespassing. But because of NIDS and the government involvement, they don't want any repercussion if. So they end up deciding that, hey, we heard these stories about this location, being both in foster care. They grew up together. One of the gentlemen had kind of lost his Native American roots. He was brought up in a white or Caucasian home with multiple white children, white foster care children and such. So he really lost his native tie. He's now gained them back and such, but at that point, but he did and was aware of a connection, the Ute tribe, the Navajo, the wars that went on and such in these locations all throughout this area of Utah. And they had heard he believes that the first time they heard anything about the ranch was at like a local barbershop where there was a couple old guys talking about the strangeness that was going on with the ranch and what the old ranch owner had before Bigelow had bought the ranch and turned it into a location for studying science and such. So they decide one day that they want to see, these things that people are talking about. They had heard about this large wolf-like creature. Obviously, they've heard about these black helicopters. They've seen black helicopters flying throughout Utah in this region. They had heard about the cattle attacks, the mutilations. So, being a couple of young guys, they were in their early 20s. They decide, hey, let's go and check this out. And, even after being brought up in foster care, like they were brothers. They still are, and still consider each other brothers, They're very, very close, both of them together. And so they had been, after they had turned of age to move out, they both got jobs at pretty much the same place, doing the same thing, and got an apartment together. So they go from their apartment out. Mind you, it is prime time. It is before 2000. That's the best I can say. It is before the year 2000. They park at a location and they have to walk 2.5 miles from where they park their car to go over the dry gulch creek there and get into or behind Skinwalker Ranch. And they do. The whole time they're walking, they are noticing how eerily quiet everything is. It wasn't such when they got out of their vehicle and, proceeded to walk through a very arid desert-like area. But they start to get to probably a mile into their hike. They've got about another 1.5 miles. And they notice how eerily quiet everything had gotten. And it almost felt like they were being watched from all around them. It was dark out. They did have flashlights. And every once in a while, they would stop and peer around them kind of almost in a 360 and see, because both had this feeling like something's watching us or someone is watching us. At first they had thought that, you know, the government were out there watching them. And as of that period of time when they proceeded to do what they did, the security was so laxed compared to what it is now. Up front, boom, yeah. But they never expected at this period of time a couple of idiot guys. And that's what he explained. You know, a couple of idiot guys we were walking through. They didn't expect that. They expected people to come up and, you know, once these articles had come out and such, to pull up and investigate and take pictures. So they get to about a half a mile from the gulch. And that's when they really start to notice how everything feels just abnormal. They're both very cold. And mind you, it is dark out in an arid area, summertime, but it gets chilly, but not, they are chilled to their bones. You know, their core temperature was just very cold. They get to the gulch and they are looking across. They're trying to see as best as they can. These guys don't have night vision. You know, they don't have any equipment to do what they want to do. They just wanted to go firsthand and see. They see lights off in the distance, some vehicles and such. They can tell right off that one is a pickup truck, one is a Jeep, and something that looks like a kind of convoy truck for the military, the ones with the canvas tarps over the back of them, transport truck or whatever, driving away from them, but probably a quarter of a mile from their location, and not coming straight at them, going kind of parallel to them. And so they're watching this and they start talking to each other like, holy shit, you know, the military really is here. There is something going on here. You know, this isn't just a ranch and, you know, people studying UFOs and animal attacks and such. So they proceed to just sit there because at where they are, they feel very, very intimidated, and that fear is right into them. They're chilly, but they're like, you know, let's see if, you know, one of these things will come at us. They both have rifles with them. He doesn't remember what his friend had, but, you know, the rifle that he had was not going to stop anything larger than a, you know, small dog. You know, he had a 22. He thinks that his friend had a 22 as well, or his foster brother, but best friend had a 22 as well. He doesn't remember, but he's pretty sure. But that's the only rifles they had. You know, they grew up poor, you know, so they didn't have a dad figure in their lives to say, hey, you know, let's go hunting, let's do this. They just bought a couple of rifles to have rifles because that's what they did. And so they got there and they're sitting there and they're watching the lights of the vehicles off in the distance. They can see the taillights. They can see that they're doing something. They don't know. They start looking, they look back over. They do have binoculars, but not night vision binoculars. So they kind of look through their binoculars and look at the lights. You know, let's look at the house over here where the ranch is. Check out the lights. Well, as one of them is panning from the vehicles to the main part of the house there, he stops and he says, what is that? Like, what is that?
twice to his brother, hands him the binoculars, and he looks and he can see this bluish kind of white light that looks like it's 2 to 3 feet off the ground, kind of pulsating. And he's watching it, and they're both, really scared now, because there is no physical or logical way that a light would be 2 feet to 3 feet off the ground and positioned where it's at, because they can see that the light is not illuminating upward, but it's illuminating downward. So all they see is this kind of very thin line of light, but the illumination is going down. So if it was projected by a floodlight or a car light or something, that illumination would be all over. Instead, it's centralized into this one part of the ground there. And they're starting to talk about this. They don't know orbs, they know UFOs. And he says, holy shit, is that a UFO? Is that a small UFO that we're seeing? What is that? And they just keep watching it. And they notice that at this point, they see a vehicle coming from the main ranch, very quickly coming toward the location of that light. And they see the Jeep vehicle and the Army convoy truck turn back around. The pickup is still parked there, but they see these two vehicles and this vehicle come, and they're a distance away from this light. They have their headlights pointed at the light. They really can't make out much because of the vehicle's high beams being on this very strange kind of portal, which is pretty much what it was. And they're both now talking amongst themselves, handing the binoculars to each other. Look at this. What just happened here? What did you see? I didn't see anything. I just saw this, and that. Nothing happened for a couple of minutes. The vehicles are stationary. Nothing's going on. This light is still kind of pulsating, but not really getting brighter. It's just strictly staying the same, but it looks like it's moving. As they're watching, a couple of minutes go by, and he starts to tell time because of how long this, that truck had been stationary for. So they had been watching this go on for about 10 or 15 minutes. And that truck, the pickup truck, the third vehicle, came back very quickly, like probably too fast for the terrain that it was going in, because they could hear the metal of the box, the truck box bouncing, and there's just a bunch of rattling because this truck was hauling ass towards this location. It stops with the first two. So you've got this Jeep that's kind of right here, and these two that are right here, and this pulsating light that's right there. Now this truck is there, and high beams immediately on it. Now the light is starting to not fade in color wise, but their view of the light is fading because of now 8 car lights, 2 on each vehicle, obviously headlights, pounding down on this. So you've got so much light, but you can still see a very distinguishable bluish white light. And they hear a gunshot, and they both kind of freak out, because even though they're trespassing, even though they are doing something illegal, And he said, make sure your audience knows that we were in foster care, but it wasn't because of us. Like my family had their issues with alcoholism and such, and his family had issues with drug addiction and abuse. And that's why they both ended up in foster care. It wasn't because they were bad kids. They never had been arrested. Neither one have even a driving infraction, like they're both good guys, and they were good kids back then. So this gunshot rings out, and, they both kind of hunker down a little lower because, you hear a report, and your instant thought is, am I going to get hit? So they kind of like lay down, and they're still watching, and they see two of the truck lights go off, and then the Jeep light, the other truck there, what they thought looked like a Jeep, that light went off as well. So now you have just the only light on would be the last truck that pulled up. And you can hear yelling. He can't make out what they're saying. And they see the light, this bluish white light, raise up in the sky just a little bit more. And it was hard to judge the height of it. But he said that it may have went from 2 to 3 feet off the ground to 10 feet off the ground, lowest 6 feet, but it was at least somewhere between 6 and 10 feet off the ground at this point. After the gunshot and all the truck's lights went off, they still got the pickup light on, and they hear yelling back and forth, people talking, and they see this kind of what looked like a blob with legs kind of blop out of this light. Something just dropped out of the light. His friend, he's got the binoculars, and he said, "Holy shit, what was that?" Hands him the binoculars because he wants to see what's going on. And they distinctly remember hearing something along the lines as, "It's returning our cattle now." A yell, someone yelled that to someone else, and this object that dropped out of this portal did not move. So instantly they hear that. He's thinking, holy shit, the cattle mutilations are real. They just dropped a cow out of this portal. And that was enough for both of them at that point. They both make the decision to, let's get the hell out of here. Obviously we know now that this is real. They both agree they're, early 20s and terrified. And they proceed to walk that 2.5 mile hike back to their car. And they're keep looking back to see if any of the trucks are coming toward them or not. Nothing, thank God, does. But as they are about another mile from their vehicle, they notice off in the distance on the side of them toward where their vehicle is a pair of red eyes. And they could tell that it was eyes because it blinked. They saw the blink, and there was no reflection or red reflectors out that way when they walked in, and reflectors don't self-illuminate. So they stop right there, and they're like, what the hell is that? They're talking amongst themselves. You think it's, do you think it's that wolf creature? Do you think it's a Bigfoot? Is it, those guys messing with us with red lights? Do you think they knew we were here? And voice of reason, they didn't know we're here, but what is that? And they keep walking a little bit more, and they notice that behind that set of red eyes is another set coming up to that one, and almost like side by side, looking dead at them. Like you can tell when something's looking at you, and he felt that whatever, at that point they had no idea what it was, but whatever it was staring right at us. So they real sketched and start to run towards 4750 where they had parked their car. And it's dark. It's a rough terrain. They get no farther than 150 to 200 feet from where they were, that one of them falls and hits his chin and splits his chin wide open. He goes back and picks up his brother and says, he has to turn the flashlight on. They were running in the dark because they didn't want these, whatever that was, to know. Obviously it knew they were there, but they didn't want to give it a perfect spot on to where they were. He clicks his flashlight on and looks at his brother's chin, and it's just gushing blood. And there was a rock, picks him up, and there's like, we gotta go. Are you okay? He takes a bandana or handkerchief out of his back pocket and puts it on his chin, and they start to haul ass towards their car again. As they are running, they can hear running behind them, and they hear growling, and they hear panting, breathing, heavy breathing and growling. They stop again. They can see in the distance a car going down the road where they parked their car. So they're about 3/4 of a mile away. They knew, judging from that vehicle going down that road, 4750, that our vehicle is right in that location, but we've still got a distance in whatever this is. It's on our ass, and it is getting close. He turns his flashlight on, and these are not our high-powered mag lights or, these million candle watt or whatever they're called, lights that can light up the night sky, but bright enough to where click and you see this large, hairy humanoid creature with a dog face staring at you in the distance, and then you see it drop to all fours, and the other one comes running up behind it, and it's standing bipedally now. Both one's a quadruped, and they're both looking at this thing. And he says to his brother, I don't think we're going to get out of here, but I don't want you to die. So you start running. I'm going to fall back behind you. You're hurt. And if they get me, just keep running. Get to the car. At least it doesn't kill both of us. And they're like, no, I'm bickering now. I'm not leaving you. You're not leaving me. We're going. We're getting the hell out of here. They keep running, and as these creatures, these bright red eyes are coming at them, it was almost like something stopped the collision of where, because they're running this way toward their vehicle, and these eyes are coming this way towards them. And it stopped. It was like there was a force field blocking the way of these creatures, or they stopped on their own accord. But I and he, as we were talking, said, it doesn't feel like they would stop, unless they were just there to terrorize you. But it's almost like, wouldn't they just run by you to show you, hey, we could catch you at any time? As they realize, like, these things are not moving anymore towards them, but going in a straight line where this force field was, they can't see anything except these eyes. They turn their light on one last time before they take in a dead sprint, and they click their light and they see another, again, the same picture that they saw a couple of minutes beforehand. 2 canine-like creatures just staring at them. But why he said a invisible force field was because it looked like to him the quadruped was stopped and just staring, but the one that was bipedal, it looked like it had its hands like on a window looking, like how a person or anything would put their hands on a window and look in. And that's what it looked like to him. He said he may be wrong. We're talking 20-something years ago, and their adrenaline was so high, their fear factor was so high. But he is 100% sure that that's what he saw. Like, it was just stopped and staring at them. And they just haul ass to their car. And they get to their car and they jump in, unlock the door, jump in, and proceed to go to the nearest hospital so he can get his chin sewn up. So they end up getting to the hospital. What happened? We fell. Sew his chin up, and they go back to their apartment and they start talking about everything that just happened. Can you believe that? Can you do it? Now it's morning, it's daylight, and they go to bed because they had been up all night and worked that day. They had 2 days off, so they could take the time and get some rest. They go to bed after they had talked and, said everything. Did you see it standing there like this? What the hell? Do you think that was a cow that fell out of that hole? What the hell was that hole? Was that a UFO? What do you mean by they're returning our cattle now? And why didn't it get up? So they now make the decision to drive back to that location the next night. Park almost in the same vicinity that they were, but walk in to the last place where they saw the creatures. And that what their plan was is they were going to walk in and just see if they could see any footprints, any kind of debris, feel that area, if there's like a glass wall or an invisible force field there, to see if they can feel anything. They get there and they walk out. They don't see the creatures. Nothing. They don't have this eerie feeling. They don't have kind of anybody's watching us, nothing. But they can't make out any prints either. And they don't feel any kind of invisible force field. So courage now has settled in, and they said, let's start walking again. Let's see what they're doing tonight. This is absolutely crazy. We got to see what they're doing tonight. They proceed to walk that 2.5 mile walk from where their vehicle is, and roughly halfway to the location, this right in front of them, they're walking, and right in front of them, this whitish blue light just kind of opens up in front of them. 30, 40 feet in front of them. Just once again, the illumination is not upward, it's downward. And they both freeze. The fear was almost immediate, almost like instant cold, instant fear, and there was a smell that he still can't explain. He said, I've heard people describe it as roadkill, as urine, as feces. He said, but this was so much worse. It was a deathly, disgusting smell, but he couldn't place he couldn't place it with any rotten kind of anything until years later, and he had went to a saltwater kind of marsh area where shrimping goes on. And when he went there, he noticed this smell. He's like, holy shit, that is so familiar to what I smelled back then. So they get hit with this smell, but it's not saltwater smell. Don't get me wrong there. It's a very foul odor, but it was nothing like he had ever smelled before. And the only thing he could compare it to is what I just said, like a saltwater marsh with decay and just a lot of filthy odor, probably decay from like the methane of dead animals, whatever. I don't know. I'm not a scientist, but it was bad. They start to back up, and they click their flashlights on to see what it is, because they're trying to figure out if there's any shape to it or not. Is these creatures sitting on it? Are these dogmen that we just saw the night before sitting on it? And it raises up. They're standing there for 10 minutes. It's stationary for 10 minutes, but all of a sudden, without any kind of warning or anything, it raises up and it gets to roughly 10, 15 feet off the ground, higher than the one that they saw the night before. And they see this kind of movement in this blue light. And they're both like petrified. And he remembers feeling his brother put his arm on his bicep, and his brother said, we gotta go, we gotta get out of here. And what they saw was this enormous hand come out of this hole and hit the ground, right? They could see like an arm, just huge, hit the ground, and they could see a shoulder coming out. And it was at least 4 times the size of their arm, their shoulder, just huge. They turned around and started running as fast as they could. A couple of times they turned their flashlight on, obviously, because they didn't want any more incidents, because whatever this thing is they turn around a couple of times and they got their flashlight lit the whole time. And they see that pulsating light, but the arm is not there anymore. And they see the light just go up, 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 and then just vanish. They get to their car. They're screaming at each other. Did you see it? Did you see it? What the hell was it? What the hell was it? What was that? You see an arm? Was that an arm? And they're both in just shock. They're like, at this point, they made a pact with each other. We're not going back there no matter what. We now know that 1, the government is there, but 2, everything that we've heard from the old timers in our town is true. There are some really bad stuff going on out there. They proceed to just forget about it. Not really forget about it, but like I said, there was no more intention on going there. Those 2 nights pretty much cured them of their curiosity. Like, curiosity killed the cat. Well, they would be the cat, but it didn't get them this time. And they didn't want to risk it the 3rd time. And, finally, curiosity does kill the cat. So they pretty much gave up on ever going back there. He has never wanted to go back there ever. About 9 to 10 days later, longer than a week because of their work schedule and everything, they decide to go camping. And they were going to hike out there and go camping. They had gone into the Uinta mountains, and they had taken a trail system. They camped out where their camp was about a mile away from Katy Lake, and they had taken some trails. There's like a trail system out there called Rasmussen, and everything was going smooth. You know, there was no eerie feelings. There was no any kind of bad vibes. Nothing. They were up there for 2 nights, and they were going to leave the third night, but just, you know, third afternoon is when they were going to hike back out. So they're camping. First night goes by, no issues. Second night, no issues. They get ready for bed. They're in their tent. It's a beautiful, beautiful night. There's no rain scheduled. There's nothing, no bad storms. It's warm out. It's not really hot, but it's warmer out. They have their rain flap off on their tent. They're sleeping. He doesn't know how long they had been asleep for. They had a pretty good sized tent. So his brother's on one side of the tent. He's on the other. In the middle, they've got their gear, their rifles with them, their 22s with them in case anything happens. And I'm laughing at the 22 because, you know, he even said, we had no idea anything about firearms. We didn't have a father figure, you know, to teach us this shit. We thought, you know, oh, guns were guns, you know. Now, obviously, he knows better, but we bought pretty much 2 cheap 22s, and the ammunition was cheap, and, you know, so we thought that would be enough to protect us. So they're sleeping. His brother says that he thinks they had been asleep for maybe 3 or 4 hours. There was no sign of daybreak at this point. He gets nudged, and it's his brother, and he's like, you know, he's nudging him, and he just quietly says, you know, what do you want? What do you want? And he says, he remembers his brother saying, whatever you do, don't open your eyes yet. But there's something outside of our tent right now. And I don't know what it is. But kind of roll slowly onto your back and look to the side of you. You know, my side of the tent. Look kind of my side to the front of the tent. So he did. He said, I rolled over, and he said, I remember I'm laying there, and he said, it's just real quiet. He goes, I can hear, you know, my friend breathing. He goes, he said, and I see this kind of light outside of our tent, and it doesn't look like it's moving. It's not a flashlight. It's bigger. And he says, you know, to his brother, what the hell is that? They're whispering because they don't know what this is. And as they're talking and looking out, you know, they have not looked up. They're looking in front of them over to the side of the tent, and they see the light rise, and he pushes his brother. He, you know, out of fear, you know, is it that thing that we saw? Is it that thing that we saw? and they're watch it, and they can see now out of their, they followed it up with their eyes. So they're looking out of their rain flap, the screen, the rain flap's not on. They're looking out of the screen and they can see it off in the distance, but now it's visible through the screen. And he says, one of us, and he goes, I don't remember if it was me or if it was my brother, but one of us said, holy shit, it is. And at that very instant, like right as one of us said, holy shit, it is when we heard growling. And it sounded like it was right on top of us. My brother and I both looked up simultaneously, and what was standing on both sides of the tent, there was one standing on my side and one standing on my brother's side, staring down from the top of the tent, looking down at us. The two dogman creatures that we saw 7 to 10 days ago on Skinwalker Ranch. He said, I closed my eyes because I thought I was going to die. He said, these things could have tore apart that tent without any issue and killed us, and no one would have been the wiser. No one probably would have looked for us for, a week until people realized that we're not at our job. We're not seeing our foster family. We're not doing this. And he said, I closed my eyes and I started to pray. He said, and I prayed out loud, but not screaming it at the pitch, the top of my lungs. He said, I prayed the Hail Mary. He goes, and then I prayed the Our Father. He goes, and during that period of time, I could hear the growling. He said, my brother's praying whatever he's praying, and the growling stops. And they both kind of opened. He remembers, I opened my eyes and I looked at my brother, and my brother's looking right at me. And it was almost like at the same time we turned our head and looked up, and they weren't there. They were gone. He said, we looked back towards where that bluish white light was. That was gone. For the remainder of the night, we laid in our tent. I had put my rifle on top of me. My brother had his on him, and we just laid there. Absolute terror, absolute fear. He said an hour or two went by, and he goes, I remember the last thing I remember before falling asleep was hearing these birds chirping in the woods. He goes, and I thought to myself, how many of those birds are out there, and why is it so goddamn annoying? And loud and stuff. And they had fallen asleep. Daybreak breaks. They break down their tent and they hike the hell out of there. They had never talked about that ever. He's never shared it with anybody except his brother. He doesn't know if his brother's told his family or not, because they both have families. But he's never told his kids, his wife. It's just something that happened to me and my brother, and that's how it's going to be. He goes, but, I want to share it with the world so people know exactly, what these creatures are, what they're capable of. And his last kind of question statement to me was, do you think they came out of that pulsating blue light, Jeff? Did they just drop out of nowhere? And, so he really believes that quite possibly those dogmen came out of that blue light that they had seen that large arm come out of, that they had seen that cattle get dropped out of. And to this day, they both still live in Utah. He will not go down the road that they had parked on. He will not go into the mountains anymore. He is, you know, he's not going. One, he's probably too old to go out in those mountains right now. And he said it himself. He goes, I'd probably break my leg. He goes, but even, you know, at 40, at 50, you know, when we could have went hiking, we could have did this, we never did, because we couldn't get an answer of what those things were, one, and what that bluish white pulsating light was from. And did they come out of it? I said, you know, it sounds like they did, because how else would they? Why is that light there? And why were they being so quiet until you guys woke up and noticed that light is when they started growling? So did that portal, were those dogmen capable of creating and using a portal to their will? Or were they two different dogmen, different portal thing, but it was coincidentally that they looked so identical to that one that was looking, you know, like stopped and looking. And then that thing was about the same size, you know, judging on distance and, you know, mathematically figuring it out, like not a half a mile, but like a quarter of a mile, an eighth of a mile. You can make out like the distance and like width and length of something, but it's not going to be distinct. You know, it's not as big as a car, but it's maybe this big. Why would they go after them in the mountains? He 100% believes that when his brother fell and hit that rock and it split his chin open, that blood stayed there, and they came out, smelled the blood, and tracked him. He goes, what if we were at home? Would that portal open up in our home? And I said, I don't know. I said, but that's fucking scary. You know, and it coincides with everything, not everything that I've read, but a lot of things that I've heard and a lot of things that I've read. And I thank them for, you know, sharing that with me. He's never had, you know, any kind of experience with cryptid or paranormal after that. And he doesn't ever want to have any kind of experience after that. So that was his experience. I'm going to share with you a little bit more about this area of Utah, and then we'll call it a day. All right, so here's the thing that he and I talked a little bit about after, and I shared with him some stuff out of both of these books, which he's now going to buy. But he is, like me, believes that whatever that was followed them and took the opportune time to scare them. For whatever reason, why? Maybe it was because of the blood. Maybe it was because of whatever. But he thinks that that was the cause of that final incident. But he also said where they were camping to where Skinwalker Ranch or the town of Ballard would be is about 30 to 40 miles. No more than that, but 30 to 40 miles from right before Katy Lake in the Uinta Mountains to Ballard is 30 miles, maybe 40, if that. And I said to him, well, you know what's crazy is that during a period of time after NIDS and such left the area, people were interviewed. And here Here we go. Beginning in the summer of 2009, a BAASS team comprised of 6 investigators, 3 scientists, and 2 technicians alternated 1 to 2 week missions to interview area residents as well as to deploy sensor instrumentation at Skinwalker Ranch. By March of 2010, 30 residents had reported first-hand encounters were interviewed in their homes. The group comprised of lifelong residents of the area, all living within a 1 to 2 mile radius of Skinwalker Ranch. They included 4 police officers, 11 Ute tribesmen, including a shaman, 12 ranchers, 6 business owners, and the director of the local Fish and Wildlife. Half of the members of the Church of Jesus Christ of Latter-day Saints. 11 of the individuals recounted first-hand encounters with a dog or wolf-like creature that could run at the speed on 2 legs, sometimes in conjunction with orb-like activity. In estimated height, these creatures would have been 7 feet. Many of these reported observations took place during daytime hours. Some sightings were very recent, only 1 to 2 months old, while others had taken place a few years ago. All observations had encountered within a 5-mile radius of Skinwalker Ranch. From the details provided in the interview about the bipedal creature, BAASS constructed a map showing the migration routes of these creatures. Whether these extraordinary frequent bipedal dog-like creatures overlap with local Skinwalker lore is not known. Frequent sightings of small blue, white, yellow, and red orbs that are usually flying low to the ground was a persistent feature in these reports. The interview transcripts were carefully examined by independent analysis, identity from both witnesses and investigators. The only cases that were interviewed by multiple investigations, cross-reference multiple witnesses, were reported out of the DIA. Because of safeguards, later claims by a couple of retired ranch security guards, they had reports in order to earn the approval of superiors could be rebutted and dismissed. Some of the neighbors had also witnessed unidentified flying objects, including triangular, cigar, and disc-shaped objects, the majority of which were silent balls of light. So I shared that with him, and the first thing that he caught was, 1, the radius, only 5 miles, and he said, well, does that make sense? Our final experience with these creatures was 30 miles away. But I said, okay, well, it all started within 2 miles of Skinwalker Ranch and then closer. The second thing that he picked up on was the Dogman being joined with a bluish, white, yellow, or red light or orb. And he's like, do you think that these orbs that people are seeing? And I've never thought this. I've never thought about this, and it made fucking a lot of sense to me. So there are experiences where people see Dogmen and Bigfoot, and they are accompanied by an orb or multiple orbs, right? What if the reason why that orb is going with these creatures is so they can quickly disappear? What if the orb is a portal? We've heard stories of Bigfoot going, this humongous wood ape going behind a tree that big around and disappearing. It makes sense. I mean, what if these orbs that are seen with these creatures are a doorway for them to escape? Either escape from being seen or what? whatever. And I was like, holy shit, I never thought about that. I never really thought about that. I've thought about how these sightings or other sightings of orbs and dogmen together, they correlate together. But what if they are the doorway for these creatures to leave this dimension or go wherever, Security in Dulce, New Mexico used to talk about, I don't know, it's these creatures, these bipedal creatures on the area of the deep underground military base, walking around, dogmen or Bigfoot. But I never thought about, what if that's the reason why these orbs accompany these creatures, is because it's a portal for them to, I don't know. Anyway, this I found interesting. This is out of Hunt for Skinwalker. As they drove closer, the scene became clear. "That is no dog," Ellen said. As she leaned out the window, they were 200 yards away, and she had a much better view of the corral out on the passenger side of the pickup. She was right. This is about the original owners, the owners that sold it to Bigelow. Slowed down to get a better look, although the clouds of dust were still being kicked up. He could now see the perpetrator. And that perpetrator was a large animal, heavily muscled, short legs. It seemed to have the shape of a hyena's body, a bushy tail. "What the hell is that?" he muttered. The creature was plainly hunting his horses, but it didn't seem intent on causing serious harm. It would lunge at the horse's legs, looking to bite it. The horse would then kick out, gallop around the corral. The animal's tail reminded Tom of an exaggerated foxtail. Body was all wrong to be a fox. The animal looked and moved like a hyena, but its head resembled more of a dog. It had short, stubby legs like a boar, as it made sudden, rushing movements across the corral. They were 40 yards away now and dismounting the vehicle. So then it weighed, it was not a hyena, and it weighed close to or more than 250 pounds. And it jumped nimbly. It was very quick. Dogman, it sounds like just what a dogman would sound. Just exactly like a dogman. Then there's a very interesting comparison to Dulce, a parallel to Dulce in here. This is Hunt for Skinwalker, by the way, guys. This book is amazing as well. I mean, Dulce lies in a valley surrounded by majestic peaks of the mountains. When you enter the town, you immediately sense how run down the place is. Unfortunately, it is true. It's very poor there. But at the same time, Dulce has earned a worldwide reputation for the center of paranormal activity, just like the Uinta Basin. In the past 30 years, this small, impoverished town has become a host to the bewildering assortment of cattle mutilations, UFO activity, Sasquatch sightings, they should say Sasquatch or Dogman or just, UAP. Which UAP does not mean. It means unidentified, anomalous phenomenon now. It's not aerial. So right there, Dulce mirrors Skinwalker Ranch, or Skinwalker Ranch mirrors Dulce, right? For the longest time I've talked about this, I believe there is a deep underground military base underneath the Skinwalker Ranch. If there is, it would make sense why that cloaking like creature and Dogman were in the same vicinity. of the area, but are they getting along? Are they not? In the tree, what I started this upload off with. Just, there's a lot of parallels to both places. And I really believe there is a deep underground military base at Skinwalker Ranch. As far as some of the other, the ranch down the road, what is it? The Horny Toad Ranch or whatever, the Flying Monkey. I'm being funny now. I don't buy that. I don't buy that, History Discovery Channel show on these ranches, all over this country now. Because one, they've made TV shows out of them. We never heard about them until a TV show came out. Two, the reason why they made these TV shows is because they can't get the opportunity to film on Skinwalker Ranch. There is a show based on the ranch, but it has, I bet you there's certain clauses and such. So, hey, what's the next best thing? Let's create a ranch that, and tell a story that we never heard of 40 years ago, but it happened. It's just, Skinwalker Ranch is where it all freaking stemmed from for me. Dulce, this and that. These places are powerful, have history, but I don't know. Anyway, with that, I hope you enjoyed today's upload as much as I enjoyed sharing it with you guys. If I can't say enough about this book, I really can't. Skinwalkers in the Pentagon. But the prequel to that is Hunt for the Skinwalker. So, you can pick them up pretty cheap online. Put it on your Kindle, put it on your phone, or you can buy the physical copy. I myself want physical copies of these books because, one, I think it's easier for me to read with my eyes, but to have the information right there, is just something special.
And there you have it, folks. I hope you all enjoyed today's upload as much as I enjoyed sharing it with you. I'd like to thank you all for supporting the channel. It is, after all, your support that helps this channel to continue to grow and go, and what gives us all a place and a chance to share our experiences and theories judgment-free. Everyone is simply treated with the respect that we deserve. Stay safe, happy, healthy, and ever vigilant, keeping an eye on our children, pets, family, and our friends. These creatures are real. These events have happened. Share this information with those you love and care about, and it may just help save their lives someday. Until next time, never stop asking questions, never stop searching for the truth, and God bless you all.